Usually when we talk about, like, a medical diagnosis, there's this underlying expectation of precision.
Right. Yeah, like it's just pure science.
Exactly. It feels like engineering. You fall off your bike, you break your arm, and the X-ray shows that jagged white line on the screen.
And the doctor just points to it, broken or not broken.
It's a clean narrative. And I think as human beings, we desperately crave that kind of clarity. We want to be able to look at a screen and see the problem isolated in black and white.
Which makes sense. But then you step into the world of human behavior.
Oh.
Step into psychology or social shifts or economics, and suddenly that beautiful, precise X-ray machine is completely useless.
It's just gone. We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, honestly, entirely murky.
It's the ultimate chaotic system. You
Yeah.
know? You're trying to measure invisible forces, emotions, biases, societal pressures, using really blunt instruments.
Exactly. And yet here is the paradox. If you're listening to this right now, think about the world you interact with every single day.
It's all data.
We live in an era where we have more data, more algorithms, and infinitely more processing power than at any point in the history of our species.
Yeah, we are absolutely drowning in information.
Every click, every purchase, every heart rate monitor on your wrist is generating numbers. But today, on our deep dive, we are taking a stack of your sources to explore a wildly counterintuitive idea.
And it's a big one.
Right. We aren't lacking data. We are suffering from a fatal illusion about what data actually means. We have essentially devolved into being practically blind in an ocean of numbers.
And that blindness, I mean, it leads to a kind of decision paralysis. We see this all the time.
Oh, constantly.
We have more information than ever, yet we consistently make terrible reactionary decisions when faced with real-world anxiety, social friction, or, economic instability.
You just don't know how to read the water. So our mission today is to completely rewire how you understand the underlying statistical logic of reality.
So it's a full teardown.
Yeah. We are going to dig into the foundational classic work of psychology professor Ana Maria Lopez, Calvo de Feijoo.
Specifically, her comprehensive analysis exploring research and statistics in psychology and education.
Right. We're going to use her data to show you how we've been systematically taught to look at the world completely wrong.
What's fascinating here is that Feijoo's work proves the root of our blindness isn't a lack of intelligence.
It's not that we're dumb.
Exactly. It's not that the average person is incapable of understanding the world. It's a fundamental structural flaw in how we are trained to think from a very young age.
So let's start right there. We need to expose what I'm going to call the textbook lie.
Oh, this is the slap in the face.
It really is. Feijoo actually did this massive systematic review of the textbooks that were being used to teach statistics to university students.
Specifically students in psychology and education.
Now keep in mind, these are the textbooks training the exact people whose entire future career is to analyze and predict human behavior.
The people we rely on.
Right. And she looked at the exercises these students were being asked to do. The breakdown she found is staggering.
It really exposes the machinery of how we educate people.
She found that 72% of the exercises in these textbooks simply demanded the student to calculate.
Just run the numbers.
Yeah, just calculate. Another 6% just said do, and 9% said resolved.
So if you combine those, you're looking at 87%, the entire educational focus being completely dedicated to mechanical rote execution.
Which just begs the obvious question, what about actually understanding what you are doing?
Right. Where is the comprehension?
Out of all those exercises, only a measly 13% demanded comprehension. Just 13%.
We are literally training human beings to operate like cheap calculators.
Which, ironically, is an entirely redundant skill now. I mean, my smartphone can calculate millions of data points in a fraction of a second.
Exactly. But a smartphone doesn't understand what those data points mean in a social context.
No, it doesn't.
Feijoo is pointing out a tragedy here. We've been trained to act like human calculators while entirely neglecting the logic of why we're calculating.
It's just wild to think about.
There's a great warning from the French mathematicians Feijoo and Marc that Feijoo cites. They noted that we introduced logic into the curriculum, and then almost instantly it disappeared.
It just vanished.
Yeah. Students forgot what reasoning actually was, and instead they just started believing in the quote-unquote magic of numbers and formulas.
I love that phrase, the magic of numbers. It's like teaching someone how to perfectly trace the letters of the alphabet with beautiful calligraphy, but never actually teaching them how to read a sentence.
Let alone write a poem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we throw these students into the real world, a world full of chaotic human emotions, economic fluctuations, kids struggling in schools.
And we wonder why they completely freeze.
Right. They know the formula, they can calculate a variance, but they have zero comprehension of the human reality that formula represents.
And if you pair this with what we know about human memory, it gets even darker. Think about the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve.
Oh, man. The forgetting curve is brutal.
It is. Hermann Ebbinghaus proved that if you just memorize meaningless information like rote formulas without deep comprehension, your retention drops off a cliff.
It just disappears.
Yep. Within a single month, you retain less than 45% of what you memorized.
Less than half in 1 month.
So these students cram for a statistics exam, they execute that 72% calculate command perfectly, they get an A, and a month later, they are functionally illiterate in data analysis again.
Which totally explains why so many students, especially in the humanities, develop this intense visceral phobia of statistics.
Oh, definitely.
Like, if you're listening and you ever broke out in a cold sweat before a math or a stats exam in college, this is why. It wasn't your fault.
You felt like you were doing meaningless math because you literally were.
But statistics isn't supposed to be math for the sake of math.
No, absolutely not. Feijoo makes a crucial distinction here, drawing on other experts in the field. Statistics is the science that allows us to make decisions in the face of uncertainty.
Okay, I want to pause on that word, uncertainty, because that goes back to my X-ray analogy earlier.
Right, the black and white diagnosis.
We want statistics to be the X-ray. We want it to eliminate the uncertainty completely.
And that is the fatal illusion you mentioned earlier. Statistics never, ever eliminates uncertainty.
It doesn't.
No, it doesn't give you absolute truth. It just reduces the uncertainty to a manageable level. It gives you a mathematical framework to navigate the darkness.
Wow, okay.
When you realize that, statistics stops being this dreaded, dry math subject and transforms into a vital survival tool. It's like a flashlight in a dark cave.
So if our textbooks failed us by focusing on the mechanics rather than the meaning, how are we actually supposed to use this flashlight?
Right.
How do we make sense of human behavior?
Well, Feijoo argues we have to return to the absolute basics, the foundational 5 steps of research.
I like to think of this as the alchemy of turning raw chaos into predictable scientific law.
It is an alchemy, yeah, but it's a very rigorous, logical progression. It's the journey from a vague hypothesis to a concrete insight.
Let's walk the listener through this journey because I think it demystifies the whole process. Imagine you have a massive, chaotic bin of mixed Lego pieces, and you just dump it onto the floor.
Okay, I can picture that.
That pile of plastic is raw human behavior. It's overwhelming, it's messy, it's completely unreadable.
Right, so step 1 is data collection. You need an instrument to pick up those Legos.
Like what?
In psychology or social sciences, this could be questionnaires, clinical tests, sliding scales, or observation protocols. You are scooping up the raw material from the floor.
Got it.
But at this point, you just have a pile of raw data. In statistics, this unprocessed pile is called the roll.
The roll. Okay. It's just a digital pile of Legos, which means you can't build anything yet.
Exactly. You have to move to step 2, which is classification and condensation.
You have to sort the pieces. All the red 2x4s go in one pile. All the blue ones go over there.
Right. In a study, this is where you create your frequency distributions. You organize the data, maybe from highest to lowest, and you see how many times each value appears. You group the chaos into defined classes.
That makes sense.
Which naturally leads into step 3 presentation.
The charts.
Yep. This is where you make it visual. You create your charts, your tables, your histograms. You are visually laying out your sorted Legos on the table so that broader patterns start to emerge to the naked eye.
You start to see the actual shape of the data.
Exactly. Then comes step 4, which is description.
And this is where you actually start describing the mathematical properties of what you've sorted, right?
Yes. Where is the center of this data? How spread out are the pieces? Are they clustered together or scattered everywhere?
And finally, step 5, analysis and prediction.
This is where the magic happens. You pull out the instruction manual and use the sorted, described pieces to build a structure that can actually predict future behavior.
Using inferential statistics.
Right, to figure out if the patterns you found in your little sample of Legos actually apply to the entire Lego factory, the broader population.
It's a really beautiful, logical process when you understand the why behind it.
It really is.
But And this is a massive, but raw data can be incredibly deceiving.
Oh, yes. Especially during that step 4 phase, the description phase.
Right. To prove this, we have to look at the most common and, frankly, the most dangerous tool we use in everyday life, the average.
Ah, the mean. It is the perfect liar.
It really is. The average is like the spokesperson for the data that always puts a positive spin on a disaster.
That's a great way to put it.
Here is the anti-common sense reality about the mean. We are taught that the average is the center of gravity of a data set. And it is, mathematically. But because of how it's calculated, it is highly, almost laughably, vulnerable to extreme outliers.
This is a vital concept for anyone listening to grasp because we are bombarded with averages every single day on the news.
All the time.
What happens is that the mean behaves very deceptively in what we call an asymmetrical distribution.
Let me give a concrete example of this. Let's say you have a small community where 10 people live. 9 of those people are struggling. They make $10,000 a year.
Barely affording groceries.
Exactly. But the 10th person who lives in this town happens to be a tech billionaire who makes $10 million a year.
Okay, I see where this is going.
If a newspaper comes in and calculates the average income of that community, they add it all up and divide by 10. The headline the next day reads,
Average income in this town is over $1 million.
Yes. And if you are a policymaker reading that headline, you think, wow, this town is a beacon of incredible prosperity. They don't need any economic assistance.
But it's completely false.
Yeah.
The mean has been totally yanked to the edge by one extreme value. It lied to you.
It's a huge lie. Now, the median, which is just lining everyone up and picking the actual person in the middle.
Right, the 50th percentile.
The median income is still only $10,000. That tells the real story.
This is exactly why relying solely on the mean is such a dangerous illusion. It masks massive disparities.
It hides the fundamental truths about a population while giving you this false confidence that you understand them.
Exactly.
Wait, so I'm trying to wrap my head around this. If the mean can be so easily manipulated by extremes, if it can literally lie to a policymaker about poverty, why do we rely on it so much?
That's a fair question.
Like, why is it the default statistic for everything from housing prices to school test scores?
Well, we rely on it because it's computationally easy, and mathematically it is democratic. It includes every single piece of data in its calculation.
Even the billionaire.
Right. The median ignores the extremes entirely. The mean incorporates them. But to protect yourself from being lied to, a mean must never be presented alone.
It needs a partner.
It must always be coupled with a measure of dispersion. And the most powerful measure of dispersion is the standard deviation. A mean without a standard deviation is functionally a lie of omission.
Okay, let's unpack standard deviation because I feel like that's a term people hear in high school, memorize for a test, and immediately forget thanks to that Ebbinghaus curve.
Exactly. They memorize the formula and forget what it means.
What exactly does standard deviation reveal that the mean is hiding?
Think of standard deviation as a measure of heterogeneity or homogeneity. It tells you how far, on average, the individual data points deviate from the mean.
It measures the spread of the reality.
Yes. Let me give you a clinical scenario that makes the stakes of this very, very clear. Imagine you have 2 groups of teenagers, and they are all taking a clinical assessment for depression risk.
Okay.
It's a scale from 0 to 100, where 100 is severe immediate crisis.
I'm visualizing the 2 groups.
You calculate the results. Both Group A and Group B score an exact average of 50 out of 100.
Okay, so if I'm a school counselor and I just look at the average, I treat both groups exactly the same.
Naturally.
An average of 50 sounds like moderate distress. Maybe we do a group seminar on stress management for both classrooms.
That is exactly what will happen. But then you look at the standard deviation. Let's say Group A has a very small standard deviation, maybe just 1 or 2 points. That means it's a highly homogeneous group. Almost every single kid in that room scored a 49, a 50, or a 51. They're all clustered tightly around that average.
So your moderate intervention, that will work perfectly for them.
Exactly. But I'm guessing Group B is a different story.
I have a bad feeling about Group B.
Group B has a massive standard deviation, say 40 points. That means it's highly heterogeneous. The scores are wildly dispersed across the spectrum.
Wait, so if the average is 50, but the spread is huge, that means half the room could have scored a 10.
Meaning they are perfectly fine, maybe having a great week.
Yes. And the other half of the room scored a 90.
Oh, wow. A 90 is extreme risk.
Exactly. They are at immediate risk of self-harm. Now, the average for both groups is an identical 50, But if you apply that standard moderate stress management seminar to Group B, you are going to completely fail the kids who are in acute crisis.
You might literally lose lives because the mean masked their extreme distress.
Wow, that is chilling. Two groups, the exact same average, but entirely different realities.
The standard deviation is the only thing that pulls back the curtain on the actual human condition within that group. It acts like a lie detector for the mean.
It really does. But this raises an interesting challenge. It's one thing to apply these concepts to income or standardized test scores.
Sure.
But how do we apply these seemingly dry mathematical concepts of means and dispersion to something deeply abstract, philosophical, and emotional?
Right. How do you quantify the unquantifiable?
Well, Feijoo's text highlights this brilliant, almost haunting study from 1978 by a researcher named Torres, and it puts everything we just talked about into practice perfectly.
The Torres experiment is a masterclass in capturing the invisible architecture of the mind.
The setup is fascinating. Torres decided to use statistics to map one of the most profound mysteries of human development, how children comprehend the concept of death.
Which is such an abstract concept.
Exactly. He took 32 children, ranging in age from 4 years old up to 13 years old, and the goal was to measure their evolving concept of mortality.
Now, obviously, you can't just sit a 4-year-old down with a clipboard and ask, please explain your epistemological concept of death.
Right, they wouldn't even understand the words.
You have to break the abstract concept down into measurable variables. Torres broke death into 3 distinct dimensions.
Extension, meaning, and duration. Let's define those.
Okay, so extension is understanding who or what dies. Meaning is understanding what death actually is. And duration is understanding how long death lasts.
And to make sense of the data, Torres mapped these dimensions across the classic stages of cognitive development defined by the famous psychologist Jean Piaget.
For listeners who might be rusty on their intro to psych, can you give a quick refresher on Piaget's stages, just so we understand the baseline these kids are starting from?
Absolutely. Piaget argued that children don't just know less than adults. Their brains literally operate on entirely different logical rules depending on their age.
It's like a different operating system.
Exactly. The youngest kids in the study, around 4 to 7, are in the pre-operational stage. This is the era of magical thinking. They struggle with logic and tend to view the world entirely from their own perspective.
Then, around age 7 to 11, they enter the concrete operational stage.
Right. Now they understand rules and logic, but only for physical, tangible things they can see and touch.
And finally, around 12 and up, they enter the formal operational stage. This is when the brain unlocks the ability to handle pure abstraction, hypotheticals, and complex philosophical concepts.
Okay, so with that framework in mind, the data Torres extracted is completely counterintuitive to how we normally think about children and trauma.
Let's look at the meaning dimension, specifically a subcategory called personification.
This is when a child treats death not as a biological process, but as an entity, a person.
The Grim Reaper, a skeleton or a monster that comes to take you away in the night. It's a very common trope in children's media, too.
It is, and the data shows that at age 4, in that pre-operational stage of magical thinking, a massive 75% of children personify death. It is a tangible who to them.
But by age 13,
that number drops completely to absolute zero. 0%.
It's a total structural cognitive shift. When they are young, death is an external agent. And psychologically, there is a weird comfort in that.
Comfort? How so?
Well, if death's a who, maybe you can hide from it. Maybe you can negotiate with it or run fast enough to escape it.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
But as their cognitive structures evolve into formal operations, they lose that magical illusion. Death stops being a monster under the bed and becomes an inevitable internal biological reality.
And the data on irreversibility is just as stark and honestly pretty heartbreaking.
Tell me about it.
According to the statistics, children possess an absolute 0% understanding of the true irreversibility of death before the age of 11.
0%.
It simply does not compute in their brains that something is gone forever. But suddenly, at age 12, as they cross into that formal operational stage, the understanding of irreversibility spikes to 11.36%, and it just keeps climbing.
Because that is the precise developmental moment, they are finally biologically capable of grasping absolute finality.
Before that, it's just what? A nap.
Up until then, death is just a very long sleep or a trip you take. Finality is a terrifying concept, and the brain shields them from it until it has the hardware to process it.
You literally see that terror reflected in the data. By age 13, the highest percentage of their responses regarding the meaning of death, over 65%, are categorized by the researchers as emotional or affective.
They aren't personifying it anymore.
Right. They understand it's irreversible. And their primary reaction isn't clinical. It's profound emotion, anxiety, sadness, dread.
But what I find most compelling about this study is when we apply our statistical tools, the mean and the standard deviation, to those three dimensions: extension, meaning, and duration.
This is where the statistics reveal a massive, hidden cognitive chasm that you would never see with the naked eye.
Yes, this is what I want to call the duration problem.
Let's look at the mean scores for a second. As kids move from the youngest stage, the pre-operational, to the oldest stage, formal operational, their understanding of extension, again, that's knowing who dies, jumps massively.
Right, it goes from 15.67 all the way up to 28.87.
It's a huge leap. They easily learn that plants die, the family dog dies, grandpas die. It makes sense to them.
But then look at the dimension of duration, the understanding of how long death lasts.
The mean score for the youngest kids is a dismal 3.37. And you would expect that to shoot up as they get older.
You would, but it doesn't. Even when they reach the highest cognitive stage, formal operations, the mean score for duration is only 9.40.
It remains incredibly stubbornly low compared to the other dimensions.
I have to play devil's advocate here. Why is that? If an older kid understands that a plant is dead, and they understand that death means the biological function stopped, why is duration so uniquely resistant to their cognition?
Because understanding the absolute finality of time, the concept of forever, is a conceptual hurdle that haunts human beings regardless of our age or cognitive stage.
It's just too big.
Yeah. Extension is easy. It's concrete. I see the dead bug on the windowsill. I observe it. But duration requires you to project your mind into an infinite future of non-existence.
It requires you to conceptualize the absence of time. That is a philosophical and cognitive heavy lift that many adults haven't even mastered.
And this is where the standard deviation, our ultimate lie detector, comes in to prove the point we made earlier.
If you look at the standard deviation for the duration dimension, something wild happens in the middle of their childhood. Walk us through the numbers.
During that middle stage, the concrete operational phase, so we're talking roughly ages 7 to 11, the standard deviation for duration spikes to 5.46.
It is significantly higher than the standard deviation for the toddlers and higher than the teenagers.
So let's decode what that high standard deviation actually means in reality.
It means that specific age group is incredibly heterogeneous. Their scores are wildly dispersed.
Right, so you have a classroom of 9-year-olds. The high standard deviation tells us that some of those kids are starting to grasp eternity and are probably terrified by it.
While the kid sitting right next to them is still clinging to the idea that death is temporary, like a video game where you respawn.
Exactly. They are in a state of deep collective cognitive confusion. The statistics allow us to literally see the friction of their brains trying to comprehend eternity.
It's messy. It's chaotic. By the time they hit the formal operational stage as teenagers, the standard deviation drops back down to a tiny 0.57.
Meaning they become homogeneous again.
Yes. They finally solidify their understanding. The confusion settles. They're all on the same page, but the mean score is still relatively low because it's just an incredibly hard concept to articulate.
It's just brilliant. The statistics aren't just dry numbers in a textbook. They are a literal map of childhood cognitive friction. You can see their brains growing in the data.
It proves that when used correctly, statistics is the most empathetic science we have.
Okay, but this brings us to a massive dilemma. If grasping complex, abstract concepts is this difficult, whether we're talking about a child trying to understand the duration of death or a college student trying to understand the logic of an anchovia, how do we best teach them?
That is the million-dollar question. And it brings us to a historic, almost legendary battle in education.
If the old way of teaching, that 72% calculus plan we talked about, is failing and making students miserable, then surely a modern, innovative, contextualized method is the answer, right? That seems like basic common sense.
It does. And that is the exact hypothesis that Feijoo decided to test rigorously in a 1984 quasi-experiment. She wanted to figure out how to end the math dread crisis among psychology students once and for all.
So let me set the stage for this grand duel of methodologies. It's 1984. You have 130 first-year psychology university students.
Now remember the profile of a psychology student. They are there because they want to help people, they want to study the mind, they want to talk about Freud and Jung.
They do not want to do math.
Exactly. They typically dread statistics. So these 130 anxious students are divided into two shifts: a day class with 66 students and a night class with 64 students.
And in this corner, the reigning champion of academia, the traditional method.
Yes, the old guard.
This is pure rote memorization, mechanical calculation, calculating for the absolute sake of calculating with very little real-world context provided.
The professor writes formulas on the chalkboard, you copy them, you plug in the numbers, you solve. Feijoo applied this traditional method to the day class of 66 students.
And in the other corner, the challenger, the innovative method, or the renovadora as it was called.
This method was the darling of progressive education.
It used contextualized learning. It focused heavily on the psychological applications of the math.
Right, the professor wouldn't just say, calculate the variance. They would say, let's look at a clinical trial for a new therapy, and let's understand why the variance matters to these patients.
It focused entirely on the meaning behind the numbers. Feijoo applied this to the night class of 64 students.
Now, quick statistical side note. We call this a quasi-experiment because the students weren't randomly assigned to these classes by the researchers. The students chose their own shifts based on their lives.
Which introduces a potential problem, right?
A huge problem.
Yeah.
There could be underlying demographic or psychological differences between a student who takes day classes, maybe they're younger, full-time students, and a student who takes night classes, maybe they're older, working professionals.
Those invisible variables could taint the results.
But, as we'll see, modern statistics has a tool to neutralize that problem.
The grand hypothesis here, the thing they're trying to prove, is something that every single educational expert, every modern teacher, every progressive thinker listening right now would bet their life savings on.
The hypothesis is that the innovative method will yield significantly better attitudes toward the subject, and it will result in much higher final academic grades.
It makes complete, flawless logical sense. If you explain why a subject matters in their chosen field, they will find it more interesting, their attitude will improve, they will study harder because they care, and they will ultimately perform better on the test.
The stage is set for a triumphant, decisive victory for modern education.
The traditional method is about to be humiliated. But what actually happened when the data came in after 4 grueling months of teaching?
The results of this study are the exact reason we must rely on data and never entirely on our intuition, because our common sense intuition was completely spectacularly wrong.
Let's look at the attitudes course first. To measure if their attitudes improved, Feijoo used a statistical tool called an analysis of covariance, or Antokova.
If we could pause for a second, because the Antokova is a beautiful concept when you understand how it works.
Go for it.
Because this was a quasi-experiment, the day and night students might have started with entirely different baseline attitudes toward math on day 1. Maybe the night students were already more motivated.
Right.
If you just compare their final scores, it's not a fair fight.
It's like running a 100-meter sprint, but one runner gets to start 10 meters ahead of the other guy. If he wins, you don't know if he's actually faster or if he just had a head start.
Exactly. The ANCOVO mathematically calculates that 10-meter head start, and it subtracts it from the final time. It statistically levels the playing field.
It controls for those initial differences, so you are measuring the pure, isolated effect of the teaching method itself.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So the playing field is mathematically leveled. The ANCOVA runs the numbers and calculates what's called an F statistic to show if there's a real difference between the two groups.
And the resulting F statistic was 0.00049.
F is less than 1.
Break that down for us. What does an F less than 1 mean in plain English?
It means there was absolutely zero statistically significant difference in attitude between the students who suffered through 4 months of dry rote memorization and those who got the beautiful, engaging, contextualized, innovative method.
None at all.
None. The p-value wasn't even close to being significant.
Wait, I have to push back here. I refuse to believe that.
The data doesn't lie.
Okay, fine. Maybe their baseline attitudes didn't change. Maybe they still inherently disliked math because they are psychology students. But surely the innovative group scored better on the final exam, right? Because they actually understood the context. They weren't just calculating. They knew what the numbers meant.
You would think so.
Yeah.
Let's break down the itemized test data, because the researchers were smart. They didn't just give one overall grade.
They broke it down by question type?
The final exam had different types of questions. Some questions were purely mechanical calculation, just run the formula, but other questions specifically tested comprehension of the concepts.
Okay, this is where the innovative group shines.
On the comprehension questions, the innovative group scored a mean of 7.43. The traditional group, the rote memorizers, scored a 7.31.
That's practically a tie.
It is a statistical tie. A two-way analysis of variance confirmed it. The interaction between the teaching method and the type of question was not significant.
Wow.
The innovative group, which was taught specifically and exclusively to comprehend the material, failed to show any statistical advantage whatsoever on comprehension questions.
That is mind-blowing. Okay, what about the calculation questions? The traditional group must have won that, right?
On the calculation questions, the innovative group scored a 5.46. The traditional group scored a 6.89.
So let me get this straight. The traditional group actually did significantly better at the mechanics, and they completely tied the innovative group on the comprehension questions.
Yep.
The highly anticipated progressive innovative method failed on every single front. It provided zero statistical advantage. If anything, it made them slightly worse at the math.
It's a complete paradigm collapse.
Yeah.
And we have to ask why. Why did human nature defy our logic so thoroughly?
What is Feijoo's theory? Because this goes against everything I thought I knew about learning.
Feijoo hypothesizes something deeply cynical, but probably very true. She suggests that the habit of memorization is so deeply ingrained in our youth,
By standardized testing.
reinforced by years and years of standardized testing, entrance exams, and an educational culture obsessed with grades, that by the time they reach university, their brains are hardwired for a specific heuristic.
Meaning they just want the easiest path to passing the test?
Yes. Even when a passionate teacher offers them deep, meaningful comprehension, the students' brains default to the path of least resistance.
They don't actually do the heavy cognitive lifting of understanding.
Instead, they just memorize the innovation. They game the system.
Oh my God. They literally memorize the comprehension.
Exactly. If the teacher says the variance represents the anxiety of the patient, the student just creates a flashcard that says variance equals anxiety and memorizes it. They don't internalize it.
That is so dark. It's a brutal reality check for the entire educational system. You can change the content, you can change the delivery, you can make it fun and contextual, but if the underlying cognitive habit of the student is just memorize whatever it takes to pass, the innovation is completely neutralized.
It is, which perfectly sets up the next major revelation in her research. Because if the teaching method didn't change their attitude, and it didn't change their grades, does the student's attitude even matter in the first place?
Oh, this is where Feijoo busts one of the biggest, most sacred myths we all grew up with.
The myth of passion.
Right, the myth that interest is the best teacher. If you have kids, or if you've ever been a student, you hear this constantly. Follow your passion. If you don't love a subject, you can't possibly excel at it.
You hear students use it as an excuse all the time. I'm failing chemistry because I'm just not interested in it. It's not my thing.
It sounds profound. It aligns with our cultural narrative. But statistically, it is a complete fabrication. Feijoo ran the correlations between the students' attitudes towards statistics and their final academic performance.
Let me gleefully drop these hard numbers because they are staggering.
Go for it.
The correlation between a change in a student's attitude over the course of the semester and their final academic performance was R equals 0.17.
Let's give the listener some context for that R value. A correlation of 1.0 means a perfect lockstep relationship. If one goes up, the other goes up identically.
And a correlation of 0.0 is entirely random noise. There is zero relationship.
So an R of 0.17 is incredibly, incredibly weak. It is statistically insignificant.
But wait, it gets even worse for the follow your passion crowd. The correlation between a student's initial attitude toward the class on day one and their final grade at the very end of the semester was R equals 0.06.
0.06. That is essentially zero. It's white noise.
That means your attitude on the first day of class has absolutely no bearing on whether you get an A or an F.
If we pull back and look at the bigger picture, this reveals something deeply profound about human capability.
Motivation, passion, and initial interest are vastly, vastly overrated when it comes to academic or professional execution.
You're saying you don't have to like the math to do the math.
Exactly. Competence does not require affection. Success in a rigorous subject can be entirely decoupled from your emotional stance toward it.
You can absolutely despise statistics, have a terrible, toxic attitude about it, complain every day, and still put your head down and score a perfect 100 on the final exam.
Conversely, you can be wildly enthusiastic, love the teacher, love the subject, and still completely fail the test if you don't do the work.
I know that sounds cynical to some people, but Honestly, I find that to be such a liberating concept.
It frees you from the exhausting burden of having to love everything you do.
You don't have to be passionate about your accounting class or your coding boot camp or your data entry job. You can just apply discipline and do the work.
It is the triumph of discipline over motivation. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings are fickle. Discipline is an action. This data also highlights why our modern educational obsession of making things fun might be entirely misguided.
The data says clearly it doesn't matter if it's fun, it matters if they do the work.
Okay, so we've seen how our common sense intuition completely fails us. We were wrong about how children perceive death. We were wrong about innovative teaching methods.
We were wrong about passion and interest. Our feelings and our highly educated hypotheses are constantly proven wrong by the raw, cold data. So if we can't trust our intuition, how does science actually find truth in the dark?
It finds truth by fully embracing error.
I love that phrasing, embracing error.
The soul of statistics, and really the soul of the scientific method, is recognizing that we will never ever have 100% certainty. Science never claims absolute truth.
If a scientist gets on TV and claims 100% certainty about a complex human behavior, they aren't a scientist anymore. They are a zealot.
Because logically, you can't test every single human on Earth. You can't poll all 8 billion people. You always have to use a sample.
You're just taking a scoop of water from the ocean and trying to guess the chemistry of the whole ocean.
Right, so we use what are called confidence intervals.
Yeah.
You've probably heard of a 95% confidence interval or a 99% interval.
What we are doing is mathematically mapping out the darkness by explicitly admitting where our light ends.
We say, based on this sample, I am 95% confident that the true reality of the entire population falls between this number and this number.
We use a z-score to calculate that, right? Like a z-score of plus or minus 1.96 gives you a 95% interval. We are literally building a mathematical fence around our uncertainty and saying, we're pretty sure the truth lives inside this fence.
But, and this is the crucial part, by setting that fence at 95%, we are explicitly, knowingly allowing ourselves to be wrong 5% of the time.
We are signing a contract with error.
We are. We are accepting a 5% margin of error as the cost of doing business with reality. And that contract involves a very deadly, high-stakes game of trade-offs between two very specific types of errors.
Type 1, which we call an alpha error, and type 2, which we call a beta error.
This is the ultimate philosophical trade-off in human decision-making.
Okay, let's break these down because this isn't just math anymore. This is where statistics becomes life and death. Let's explain what these errors actually are in the real world.
A type I error, the alpha error, is when you reject a true hypothesis. It's when your test finds a difference or a signal that isn't really there.
You cry wolf.
Exactly. Let me use a modern tech analogy for this because I think it makes it click. Think of your email spam filter. The baseline hypothesis is that an incoming email is a normal, safe message from your boss.
A type I error is when the spam filter rejects that truth. It flags a safe email as dangerous.
So your boss emails you to say you got a promotion, and your filter throws it in the trash. That's a false positive. You rejected the truth.
Perfect analogy. Now, a type 2 error, the beta error, is the exact opposite. It's accepting a false hypothesis.
It's failing to see a danger that actually is there. You miss the signal.
So in the email analogy, a type 2 error is when a legitimate phishing scam, a prince asking for your bank account, comes in, and your spam filter accepts it as safe. It lets the virus into your inbox.
Adds a false negative.
Exactly. So society and scientists have to make a choice. Which error is worse?
In a criminal courtroom, we've decided that a type I error is infinitely worse.
The baseline hypothesis is innocence. A type I error means rejecting innocence and sending an innocent person to prison.
A type 2 error means accepting innocence when it's false and letting a guilty murderer go free.
The justice system is built on the philosophy that it is better for 10 guilty men to go free a type 2 error than for one innocent man to be locked up a type I error.
And we do the exact same thing in science, especially medicine and technology. Think about testing a dangerous new experimental drug for the FDA.
The baseline hypothesis is that the drug is useless or harmful.
So a type I error means our statistical test rejects that hypothesis. We say, hey, we found a signal. The drug is totally safe and cures the disease.
But it's a false positive. The drug is actually deadly. We just authorized putting a poison on the open market.
That is a catastrophe. People die. Now, a type 2 error means the drug actually works. It's a miracle cure. But our test fails to pick up the signal.
We say, it doesn't seem to work, and we scrap the dog.
Which is tragic. People miss out on a cure, which is undeniably bad. But, importantly, we didn't actively poison anyone.
Precisely. So we specifically design our statistical thresholds, our alpha level, which is usually set at that strict 5% or 1% mark, to ensure we make it incredibly mathematically hard to commit a type I error.
We rig the game to protect ourselves. We would much rather commit a type 2 error.
We will gladly throw away a potentially good drug, or let a guilty person go free, or let a phishing email into our inbox to ensure we don't accidentally poison the public or execute an innocent citizen.
It is the price we pay for rational control over a chaotic world.
I just love that. It's not just math. It's our deepest ethics encoded into probability. It is the mathematical expression of human caution.
It is. But so far, we've talked about controlling for these massive errors in grand, sweeping experiments, new drugs, criminal trials.
But human behavior isn't always about grand, distinct groups. Sometimes the most important psychological changes are subtle, silent shifts happening within the same person over a period of time.
Right, like how do you statistically prove that a single person is changing their mind or adapting to an environment?
Exactly. When you are measuring the exact same individuals before and after an event, you can't use the standard tests we've been talking about. The mash doesn't work.
You have to use tools designed for what we call related samples. And one of the most elegant tools for this is the McNamara test.
So Feijoo provides this really fascinating study on preschoolers to demonstrate the power of the McNamara test. Imagine you have 25 very young children, maybe 3 or 4 years old, and it's their very first day of daycare.
They've never been away from home.
The researchers do a social preference test. Unsurprisingly, their social center of gravity leans entirely toward adults.
If they need something, they want the teacher. If they are sad, they want the parent.
They prefer adults, which the researchers mark as a positive.
But the environment of a daycare is a powerful immersive force. It forces socialization. So just 30 days later, one single month, they retest those exact same 25 children.
To see if their preference has shifted away from adults and toward their peers, which will mark as a negative.
The raw data comes in. Out of the 25 kids, 14 experienced a massive shift. They went from preferring adults on day 1 to preferring playing with their peers on day 30.
And only 4 kids went the opposite way. They started out preferring peers on day 1 and shifted back to preferring adults by day 30.
So wait, I'm doing the math here.
Yeah.
14 kids shifted to peers, 4 kids shifted back to adults. That's 18 kids. What about the other 7 kids out of the 25?
The other 7 kids stayed exactly the same. They didn't shift at all, and this is where the McNamara test is brilliant. It essentially ignores the kids who didn't change, because they don't tell us anything about the effect of the environment.
The test focuses entirely on the discordance, the kids who shifted.
Okay, so to the naked eye, 14 kids shifting in one direction versus 4 kids shifting in the other seems like a pretty solid trend. But is it a true statistically significant shift, or is it just random childhood fickleness?
Maybe next week they'll all want the teacher again.
We run the McNamara test, which uses a specific chi-square formula for these 2x2 matrices of before and after data. The result: the researchers got a corrected chi-square value of 4.5.
And if you look that up on a statistical table with 1 degree of freedom, a chi-square of 4.5 yields a p-value of less than 0.025.
Okay, translate that p-value for the listener.
A p-value isn't a grade on a test. It's a probability. It is the probability that the shift we just witnessed was just dumb luck. A p-value of less than 0.025 means there is less than a 2.5% chance that this happened randomly.
Therefore, it is highly statistically significant. We can confidently reject the idea that this was random noise.
It proves a dramatic, consistent group shift.
Exactly. The environment of the daycare completely and predictably rewired the children's social center of gravity in just 1 month.
The statistics allow us to see this invisible psychological gravity pulling them away from the safety of adults and toward the complexity of each other.
It's like watching a time-lapse video of their brains adapting to society.
And it's worth noting that the McNamara test is specifically for nominal data categories like yes or no, adult or peer. If researchers want to look at continuous variables, say an actual sliding numerical scale of social anxiety in related samples, they use an even more powerful tool called the Wilcoxon signed rank test.
How does that one work?
Think about a study involving identical twins. You have 2 humans with the exact same genetic code. One twin goes to daycare, the other twin stays home with a nanny.
Later, you give them both a continuous sliding scale test on cognitive perception.
The Wilcoxon test takes the scores of twin A, subtracts the scores of twin B, and ranks the differences. Because they are genetically identical, the test mathematically filters out all the baseline genetic noise.
It isolates the pure, unadulterated power of the environmental impact. The math, again, reveals the invisible architecture of human development.
It is incredible. We've covered so much ground today.
Mm.
From the broken X-ray machine of human behavior all the way to mapping the minds of twins.
We have. And there is one final crucial rule of statistics we haven't explicitly stated, though it underpins everything we've talked about.
Correlation does not equal causation.
Exactly. Even if two variables have a perfect positive correlation and R of plus 1.0, it does not mean one causes the other.
Ice cream sales and drowning deaths are perfectly correlated in the summer. Ice cream doesn't cause drowning. The summer heat causes both.
We always have to look for the hidden variable.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive. Let's quickly recap this wild journey we've been on.
We started by uncovering the textbook lie. The horrifying fact that 72% of our educational focus is on mechanical calculation, while only 13% is on actual comprehension.
We are training a generation of blind calculators.
We explored the five-step alchemy of turning messy human chaos into scientific law, and we exposed the perfect lie of the average.
We learned why standard deviation is the only way to truly see the disparity in risk within a group.
We looked at the haunting reality of how children perceive death through the Torah study. We watched that 75% personification rate drop to 0 as their brains evolved.
While witnessing the profound cognitive friction caused by trying to understand the duration of eternity.
We shattered the illusions of modern, innovative teaching. We proved that a fancy new method doesn't automatically beat traditional rote memorization if the students are culturally hardwired to just game the test and memorize comprehension.
We learned the brutal, liberating truth that interest does not equal success. With a 0.06 correlation, we learned that competence does not require affection.
And finally, we saw the mathematical beauty of accepting a 5% margin of error. We explored how we deliberately risk type 2 errors to protect society from deadly type I mistakes.
And how we use tools like the McNamara test to watch invisible social shifts happen in real time.
It brings us to our final thought. The infinite loop of reason. We are constantly observing phenomena, hypothesizing, testing probabilities, revising our decisions, and making new observations.
But here is the provocative thought I want you, the listener, to leave with. We look at the world today, the intense social anxiety, the catastrophic policy failures, the market crashes that absolutely nobody saw coming.
It begs the question. Are we, as a highly advanced modern society, just repeating the exact same logical blind spots that Feijoo warned about decades ago?
Think about it. We have AI now. We have massive server farms. We can process billions of data points a second.
But if we don't understand the meaning behind those numbers, if our algorithms and our AI models are just executing that 72% calculate command at the speed of light, while we, the humans, have completely abandoned the 13% understand command.
Are we just making the exact same ancient, foolish mistakes, only much, much faster?
It's a terrifying thought. If we let the machines do the calculation, but we fail to do the comprehension, we are navigating the ocean completely blind.
We have built the fastest, most technologically advanced ship in human history, but we forgot to build a compass.
So the next time you see a definitive statistic flash across your newsfeed, a political poll, an economic indicator, an average housing price, don't just accept it. Ask yourself, are you looking at the truth or are you just looking at the average?
Are you looking at a clean X-ray or are you staring into the muddy waters without a standard deviation to guide you?
Keep questioning the numbers because the numbers aren't the answer. They are just the beginning of the question.